My name is Carol Baggott Forte. My former colleagues might remember me as Carol Forte. Over the course of the past 53 years, I have received a degree in opera from the University of Toronto, performed opera, music theater, and straight theater in a variety of companies across Canada. I've also become an internationally recognized singing teacher in Europe. I haven't performed since 2009, when at the Shaw Festival, I was cast to play the role of the aging diva in Stephen Sondheim's musical Follies. And here I am at 78, still an aging diva. I have numerous wonderful memories that I could share. However, I've chosen to offer you my most embarrassing theatrical experience. Here it goes. In 1980, I was hired by the Stratford Festival. I was totally overjoyed at the opportunity as it gave me a phenomenal chance to meet and work on stage with the famous British actress Dame Maggie Smith. She was cast to play the role of the sardonic Beatrice in Shakespeare's play What to Do About Nothing, in which I played nothing. Stratford's artistic director at the time was the amazing Robin Phillips. And he honored me because instead of just leaving me as a piece of neutral, unspoken, costumed material on the stage, he would create for me an untitled role as Beatrice's duenna. In other words, Maggie Smith's governess, despite the fact she was 10 years older than I. Maggie always calmed the enthusiasm for her fame by pretending she was a plain, normal, average woman. And I mean, we all know there was nothing average about Maggie Smith. She had introduced herself in the first company meeting as Mrs. Beverly Cross. We all laughed. In the first rehearsal for Much Ado, Robin Phillips directed me by saying, "Now, Carol, while on stage, you must stay 3 feet behind Maggie at all times, from entrance to exit. No exceptions. Understood?" I shook my head in agreement, but I was appalled. And so during the first break, I walked over to Maggie and said, "Oh, Miss Smith, I am very uncomfortable with Robin's direction to stay so close to you." In her own kind manner, she put her hand on my shoulder and said, "Oh, darling, please don't call me Miss Smith, just call me Maggie." I'm not comfortable with his choice either, but he is the director, and we are actors, and we must do as we are told. And so it went. I followed Maggie all over the stage and stood in rigid silence behind her, giving her some form of a disciplined glare if she turned to look at me. Here is the best part. During a summer matinee, Maggie and I stood in the stage left wing, waiting for her cue to enter the space where Beatrice would have a sarcastic verbal exchange with Benedict, played by the famous Brian Bedford. Beatrice's cue came. Maggie lurched forward. She lurched again. She lurched again, and very upset, I leaned into her right ear and said, "Oh, Maggie, that's your cue, dear, that's your cue." She lunged forward again, turning rigidly and saying to me, "I know it's me damned cue, darling, but you're on me feckin' dress. Get off me feckin' dress." I looked down in horror to see that both of my feet were on the train of her silk gown, I quickly jumped off. Maggie furiously rushed out onto the stage, and during her verbal exchange with Benedict, she turned, looked at me, and pointed that I should move back. And so I broke Robin Phillips' direction and put another few feet between me and Dame Maggie Smith. Theater, I don't know, it's funny to look back on it, because as artists, we make the plan after we've rehearsed for so many weeks, days, whatever, to go out and have a very perfected form of performance. And then after we've gone out there and we discover that our props aren't in the right place, that the telephone we're supposed to call on is on the other side of the room, which wasn't part of the original plan, that all kinds of things happen. And so then we have to learn in that process to ad-lib the moment. Another story that I can tell is about working at the Forte Festival in 1981, performing in the operetta Rosemarie, in which I played the character Rosemarie. I was not a trained dancer by any stretch of the imagination, but I had to follow suit with what was directed of us to do. And so there was a scene where 3 of us had to dance in line together in perfect step. And I thought I had it all figured out. It was like a shuffle ball change, nothing bigger than that. And I learned by watching the ones who had been trained do it, so I could pick up on it. Anyway, the women were wearing high button boots. So the operetta itself is set in the early turn of the 20th century, early 1900s. So we were wearing these high button boots and dancing. And during one performance, as we were dancing, the lace of one boot got caught in the hook of the other boot, and I could no longer kick or do shuffle ball change. The actor standing next to me looked down. We could no longer sing. We were just trying not to kill ourselves. And when it was time to get off, we went behind the back curtain and laid on the floor, holding our stomachs. We were laughing so hard. In the same show, just a few shows later, wearing my long ankle-length woolen blue triangular skirt, I was to work and serve behind a bar. And so that's what I would do. And then we would come out and do something out in front, down front stage. So I walked out from behind the bar one day and didn't realize that I had not properly buttoned my skirt. And as I tread forward downstage in front of the audience, my entire skirt fell from the waist down to my ankles. One of the reasons that I stopped performing was because I got chronic insomnia. And at the Shaw Festival during that season of 1981, they actually often had us perform, instead of 8 shows, up to 10 or 11 a week, because we would put on 11 a.m. matinees for kids coming in from schools to see, followed by a 2 o'clock matinee, followed by a Catch What You Can supper, and back on the stage for 8 o'clock the evening. And for that, I think they only paid us an extra $35 for the show. We were so exhausted that it was one of those things I thought, if I'm going to keep my life going on the stage, I better be extremely careful how I look after myself. Anyway, what else can I tell you about that time? It wasn't always fun, but often it was. There was a day when 2 of the male actors had forgotten we had an evening performance following a matinee and had gone across the street to a local bar and had a couple of cold drinks on a hot afternoon. Then, I don't know who knew or had seen them, I can't remember that part, but they'd seen them in the bar, and when they did not show up at the dressing room, they went across the street to the restaurant and found them and brought them over. And they were both loaded and they could barely get through the performance. No names mentioned. And after the episode with Dame Maggie Smith, where I kept her from going on stage by standing on her gown, I apologized profusely after the show, and she said, "Oh, darling, shit happens on the theater all the time, don't worry." There were some remarkable times. I made some incredible friendships. I missed them, but once I found my Italian husband, I just wanted to be with him. That was my thing. I just wanted to be married and enjoy that. And we were both too old to have a family at that period of time, so it was just the two of us. I have another fun story I'd like to share. During the late 1970s, I lived on the third floor of a shabby Victorian house in an apartment, and on the second floor lived a wonderful fellow whose name was Chris B., and I can't give you his last name because he became a rather well-known Canadian actor. Chris and I became friends. He was like the brother I never had, and we are still friends today. And he's still acting, and I'm not in the casket yet. So the stairway that went into my U-shaped kitchen began in his hallway and went straight up into the kitchen. And while I was living there, I got my very first role in film in a movie called In Cold Blood, where I was to play a prison guard, filmed at the Don Jail, which was on the east end of Toronto, whereas I was over in the High Park area. The direction in the script said that I must slam the jail cell closed to lock in the prisoner played by Canadian actress Linda Sorensen. And my line was, "Next time I have to search you, honey, I'm gonna make it hurt." I was really nervous. So because Chris was a trained actor, I rehearsed it again and again. He gave me subtext idea, and I felt, okay, well, yeah, it'll be fine. I'll do all right. So I rehearsed the line over and over again with a variety of ideas that Chris gave me. And I had to be at the trailer for makeup and hairdressing by 7:15 in the morning. So the night before, I thought, well, I better get everything organized. We had to bring our own hairdressing equipment and our own makeup in those days. So I put it all into a bag, left it on my kitchen table, went to bed, tossed and turned all night, and finally I got up at 5:30 in the morning, only to waken myself with 3 or 4 cups of strong coffee, get dressed, grab the bag, and rushed to the 6:30 subway train. Well, I got there on time. I got into the trailer, and the hairdresser makeup assistant says, "So, did you bring your hair equipment and your makeup and everything?" I said, "Oh, yes, I have it." I picked up the bag, put it on my lap, I unzipped it, and I was horrified because I looked down, and on the top of that bag was a tube of KY jelly and a pair of surgical gloves. I almost collapsed. I was shocked. And it was embarrassing, but nothing as embarrassing as the other story I told. So I knew that Chris had done that because he's the only person who had access to my kitchen. But it took him 40 years to finally confess to his guilty role.